We have some very special guests in addition to all of you tonight. Patty Limerick, who's our guest speaker, has brought a number, over 30 I think, teachers from across the country with her tonight. They arrived just recently, I think, for a workshop. Patty's going to be teaching a course on westward expansion this week. And these are teachers who have competed to come to Boulder to the Center of the American West at CU this week. And most of them are up in the balcony here tonight. And we want to welcome them. Given the roots of Chautauqua, I think it's just incredibly appropriate that we have these teachers here today, so thank you all. Now, one thing that I have to say is that the teachers are going to have to leave after Patty speaks and head back to CU to get busy working. And so there will be a slight pause as they come down the very quiet wooden old steps from the balcony. So anyway, I am delighted to, I meant to mention that it's the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History that has brought the teachers here to Boulder this week. So I assume that you all got a grant from them, and really pleased about that. I'd like to introduce the board. Actually, they're going to introduce themselves, of directors of the Chautauqua Association. And Nan, why don't you start? We'll go around that way, and then we'll go around here with Shelley.
I'm Nan Anderson, Vice President. Okay, I'm Nan Anderson, Vice President, and I also serve on the Executive Committee and Buildings and Grounds.
Hello, I'm Bob Morehouse, and I'm in my 6th year term here, and sad to say, I'm on the board. I'm the treasurer, and so I'm on the finance committee, and of course I'm the executive committee and also the sustainability committee, which is where my real passion is for this organization.
Bill Briggs. I'm finishing my 5th year on the board. As secretary of the board, I'm on the executive committee, I'm on the sustainability committee, and the governance committee. Thank you for coming tonight.
Good evening. I'm Star Waring. I'm beginning my 2nd year on the board, and I'm on the governance committee.
I'm Dan Corson. I'm finishing a 2-year term on the board. I serve on the Building and Grounds Committee and the Community Connections Committee.
Hello everyone, my name is Frank Bruno and I'm beginning my 2nd year on the board and I serve on the Finance Committee.
Hello, I'm Margaret Ryder. I'm completing my 2nd year on the board and I'm the Cottager representative to the board.
I'm Henry Beer, and I'm in my 1st year as a board member, and I'm on the Community Connections Committee.
Hi, I'm Shelley Dunford. I'm the executive director up here at Chautauqua.
Hi, I'm Lisa Moorzell. I'm completing my 3rd year on CCA. I am the council liaison to CCA, and I serve on the sustainability committee. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bruce Newman. I'm ending my 1st year. This is my 1st annual meeting, so it's a real treat to be here and have you all here.
I'm Mike Franson. I am actually retread, so I had 6 years on the committee, and now I'm back in my 2nd year, so 8.
Ann Clements, I'm finishing my 2nd year, and I'm on the Finance Committee.
Good evening, I'm Julie Rogers. This is my 3rd year on the board, and I'm on Community Connections and Governance.
Thank you all. This is a group of hard-working volunteers, and we definitely appreciate everybody's service. Tonight we have a guest speaker, delighted to introduce, for the dead chicken up here, so I hope no comment on anything. Patty Limerick is a professor of history at the University of Colorado Boulder and the faculty director and chair of the board of CU's Center of the American West, which she co-founded in 1986. She's one of the leading historians of the American West, in addition to being a former CCA board member. Patty's list of accomplishments, appointments, and honors is long and distinguished, and I'm not going to read them all here because it would bore her terribly, except I will sneak in that she's been a MacArthur Fellow. I think you all know how impressive that is. But I would like to highlight what I believe is surely the most unique of her titles: her appointment by former CU President Benson to be the university's official fool. Now, before you laugh, although it's too late, if you will recall, I'm sure you will from your Shakespeare and medieval history, the fool is in the enviable position of speaking truth to power without fear of retribution. This is a duty that Patty has exercised with relish, vigor, and a jolly verbal scalpel, which we have all appreciated over the years. As a nationally sought-after speaker and author, and yes, as official fool, Patty approaches all topics with new perspective, insight, wit, and a willingness to engender controversy. Her bio states that she has dedicated much of her career to demonstrating the benefits of applying historical perspective to contemporary dilemmas. That is exactly what we've asked her to do today with her talk, The Relevance of Chautauqua in Our Time. Please help me welcome Patty.
I guess I forgot to introduce Cindy to the chicken, but this is the chicken of civil discourse. You notice the chicken is not present everywhere in our world, the chicken of civil discourse, but we've got it here tonight. So thank you, Cindy, and thank you, board members, and I used to be one of you, and I appreciate very much what you do, and I bet your attendance is better than mine was. That's my guess. It is a great privilege to give this talk. I have had innumerable good times at Chautauqua since I moved to Boulder. I remember particularly one in this room with the Center of the American West co-founder, Charles Wilkinson. It was a great honor to be paired with him on that, and really so many good times that would take a while to list. The Center and Chautauqua have collaborated, and I'm not sure if anyone in the room would be, it's been a while, but we did a lecture series in this room called Remedies for a New West, Healing the West. And we had speakers from the university from every field, from civil engineering through to linguistics, ecologists, historians, who were taking on historically generated problems in the West and finding solutions, not simply bemoaning them, but figuring out if the Arapaho people were losing the language, and few of the children spoke it. Andy Cowell was one of our speakers. He's gone in to try to help the Arapaho people regain that language and pass it on. Anyway, all kinds of wonderful things. And we did it here, and it's a collection of essays, in case you ever wanted that, and it came first in this room. We did a really cool, wonderful program in, I think, 2000 called Listening to the West, where we had amazing speakers we co-sponsored together out on the green, and then we would come up here and talk individually. So I was in here chatting with Tish Inahosa, I will just say, not drop names, and all kinds of people, interesting people. Flaco Menace's brother, not him himself. Anyway, we have had our collaborations, and I would be pleased if some of these ideas that I'm proposing tonight might turn into future ones, but I'd also be perfectly pleased if you just took them and put them into action. And Joey, you would administer them. That would be good. So if you were interested in collaboration, that'd be fine. Otherwise, I will just hand them over. So I'm inviting to join me tonight in what is actually a hard task, a fun task sometimes, and a maddening task of sorting through heritages. Every one of us has done this with some are too young to have done this, my teachers are done that. Most of us have done that with aging parents, so sorting through the heritage and how to choose what to keep and what to discard. And in many ways, every moment of human life is that challenge for the living, sorting through their heritage, figuring out what to keep and what to discard from what they have got as a legacy from the past. So what traditions to keep, what traditions to salute with respect and gratitude and then let go of, what traditions to build on with innovations that might vary from the tradition but might carry on in the spirit of that tradition. We should be doing all that so that the people of the future will have traditions inherited from us to inventory and appraise and retain and discard according to their own terms and their own needs. So that is my purpose tonight, is to go through that. I offer a little bit of reflection on the history of Chautauqua and why I'm offering these proposals, but I've divided my proposals, suggestions, and recommendations into two categories. The category of the plausible and possible, and the category of this seems kind of wacky, but is still worth a try. Oh, I forgot it, a second, I have a prop. Besides the chicken. I have a magic wand. So I will deploy the magic wand if I need to for the ones that seem to be in the more doubtful category. I should be using that for magic, I guess. You'd have magicians here, right? That's a Chautauqua tradition, is magicians, and some of them surely had magic wands, or why would you bother having them if they didn't have magic wands? So, okay, so now I'm ready to go. And I'm going to start, my first proposal arises from a really genuinely humiliating confession for a historian to have to make, and I could fudge it and conceal it, but that doesn't seem honorable either. So I'm going to tell you that I did not realize until just a few weeks ago, preparing for this, how recently Chautauqua was in bad days, we'll just say that, and how just in to me a few years ago, just a few years before I moved here, Chautauqua's leaders and supporters had taken on a bad situation, the dilapidated, maybe even ruinous state of the auditorium, the structures, and a parallel decline in public programming in the 1970s. Most of the music performances, when they occurred, happening here, and really a kind of quieted world. I moved here in 1984, things were happening, the auditorium looked great, and it never occurred to me as an historian to say, is this the way it was continuously from the, it would be a remarkable structure, a magic wand structure, if you could keep it intact from the 1890s without nature wearing that down and so on. So anyway, that is amazing to me that I moved here in 1984, I came to Chautauqua, I enjoyed it, and I never asked the historian question about, how is it like this? How did it get like this? Why does it look so good? So, I repeat that embarrassing confession. I'm an historian and I never got around to asking how recently did this place come back to such a state of vitality. So that leads me to my first proposal, which is that it's totally my conviction that that amazing act of restoration, repair, rehabilitation, revitalization, that should be ballyhooed. And I looked up the word ballyhooed to make sure I had that right. And it is what I meant to say there. It should be publicized, it should be praised, it should be celebrated, and no one, historian or not, should be permitted to live in the state of ignorance that I was in for a period of time. So ballyhoo this amazing accomplishment in the maintenance, restoration and maintenance, the restoration, repair, and maintenance. And the reason I'm pushing this so hard is that I think that has got to become, this campaign in other arenas, maintenance has to become a form of heroism. And I don't think there's any, I see a Greek historian here, I don't think there are any Greek gods who specialized in maintenance, is that right? So, well, that's where the problem came from, because having a Greek god can make a huge difference with a good enterprise, because then you have heroes and you have achievements and they're mythic and so on. But maintenance deserves, maybe we could work with Bob Hofelder to invent a Greek god, a little bit late in the game. And maintenance indeed is a heroic activity, because maintenance of valuable structures is what we give as a gift to ourselves and to posterity. It is the most down-to-earth way of being in that chain of human connection. And here, Committee on Sustainability, I hope you're okay with this, but I think durability is a better word than sustainability. I think there is a political divide that would make durability a better alliance-building term. And durability is a very good word, there's nothing wrong with it. Durable, Merriam-Webster, able to exist for a long time without significant deterioration or inequality or value. That's not what we all want for ourselves, for heaven's sake. It's just, I'm okay on that myself, but durability is, I think, a word that enlists engineers, brings in a broader sector of a political spectrum. So just a thought that that word might get somewhere. And durable, goodness, the synonyms, what a beauteous thing. Dependable, enduring, lasting, permanent, reliable, stable, abiding, constant, persistent. Is there anyone who would prefer not to be durable in the room? No, okay, so I rest my case. That's my first proposal. And now we move to the background to the second proposal. We're still in the plausible and possible ones, right? Okay, so in thinking about anticipating this talk, I was knocked over by the promise that was delivered on for me, and I think could be for others, of stepping away from brooding about the state of our nation in 2019 and the disunion and the strife and the struggles and the friction, stepping away from that and directing my attention instead to the state of the nation at the time of the founding of the Chautauqua movement. So it is time travel, it is taking the thoughts that haunt us or hang in our heads, whether or not we want them there, about our own times. If you go to the context of the era when the Chautauqua movement originated, and I will say I did not really see this fully developed in books about the Chautauqua movement. I think it's underplayed in that. Anyway, that was a rattled and disordered time. The Gilded Age, the 1870s, that was not a time for nostalgia. Industrialization was making enormous changes in how humans lived and worked. There was an intense and sometimes violent current of labor struggles. There were workplace dangers and no protections for workers in those circumstances. There were extraordinary concentrations of wealth, monopolies and oligopolies of wealth, new fortunes constructed from vertical and horizontal control and consolidation of industry. Rockefeller, Carnegie, and yes, Andrew W. Mellon, a foundation that just gave the Standing American West $800,000, so we're not going to be talking very critically about the, oh, we want to say, oh, robber barons? No, where'd you get that word? Okay, so those were, and J.P. Morgan and figures like that, extraordinary concentrations of power and money. Financial power wielded without any restraint. Or take your attention and put it over to the railroads. The railroads, all of them in some form of shaky finance, many of them manipulating their situation as long as they could before they would finally concede to pay back government debts and so on, so pretending to be more financially disabled than they were sometimes. Anyway, not a place to go for inspirational tales of human nature in the management of railroads in the last part of the 19th century. Examples of corruption of every kind at every level of government, urban machines, senators buying the votes of state legislators. This is before direct election, so you have to buy a few legislators, quite a few sometimes. The Compromise of 1877 that brought the end to the reconstruction of the post-Confederacy South and abandoned African-American people, freed slaves to an unprotected state. The Panic of 1873, another crushing panic, and Depression in 1893, both of those two panics lasting. Panic sounds like a short-term thing, and these were like 3 or 4 years of very bad financial situations. So, Jim Crow segregation at its peak, the low point of American Indian numbers and power, and for the West, the decline in precious metal mining, the fears of timber famine, the exhaustion of farmable land open for claiming, farmers' desperation, and the rise of the populist movement. The distinguished Princeton historian Neil Irvin Painter wrote a book about that era called Standing at Armageddon. And that was also phrasing that Theodore Roosevelt often used in speeches. He would end his speech, "We stand at Armageddon and we labor for the Lord." Armageddon, definition, the place where the last battle between good and evil will be fought. So, it is important to remember how much the Chautauqua movement was driven by a search for refuge, a haven from disordered times, and as an alternative to lamentation and fatalism. So now you are all wondering, is she trying to draw some sort of parallel between the state of affairs in the United States in 2019 and the state of affairs in the United States when the New York Chautauqua was founded in 1874 and the state of affairs when the Texas Colorado Chautauqua was founded in Boulder in 1898? You want to guess the answer? Yeah. Yes, she is trying to draw up such a parallel. And in ways that are just that strange form of consolation of, it was really bad then. They made it through. Might have been worse. In terms of the measures of physical suffering of people, it probably would have to be gauged as worse. So while that may not seem like a very cheery historical comparison, it does have a little bit of consolation, but it carries the great promise for the people gathered here tonight, which is, if the original founding of the Chautauqua in New York and in Colorado represented a search for refuge and a haven from disordered times and an alternative to lamentation and fatalism, then you, board members especially, but supporters all together, then your commitment to this institution turns out to be wonderfully aligned with your ancestors and predecessors. They had reasons to respond as they did in creating these institutions, responding to their times, and you have as good a set of reasons and maybe better opportunities. Because there's different premises, we'll get to that a little bit later, that set you freer to help your society and your nation in ways I'll get a little bit closer to. In the meantime, this brings us to our second proposal. The Chautauqua Book Group, which is will alternate back and forth in alternate years, because you can't discuss these books enough in these times. We might add a few into it, but one year they'll discuss Nell Irvin Painter's Standing at Armageddon, the United States, 1877 to 1919, quite readable. And then the other year they'll discuss Richard White, The Republic for Which It Stands, the United States During Reconstruction and the Gilded Age, 1865 to 1896. Both very fine books for saying, you think you have it bad? And then beverages afterwards, which you couldn't have had here in 1898. Just did that. So I will come, and now the chicken of civil discourse. I probably shouldn't do this. Okay. Well, anyway, this is used to license people to feel free to speak. So at this point, if I were going to use the chicken of civil discourse, I would say, how many of you would like to take part in that book group? And then I would throw this, and if it landed on you, you'd have to say a quick yes or no. And then throw it on to somebody else, but it's kind of a harsh chicken. It's too still. So, okay, we won't do that. I'll just ask you, how many of you want to be in that book group? Okay, we won't need the whole dining hall for the words, but still, it's a start. And we're going to do it because the issues remain so important. We're going to go back and forth and do those two books for years. So if you didn't get the first round, you can come back for a later one. Okay, then a third proposal. And they're a little bit more abstract in some ways, not as practical as that one, I guess, but take every opportunity, the third proposal, take every opportunity to build on the Chautauqua tradition, we're back to the sorting of traditions thing, of demonstrating the compatibility of leisure and pleasure with the serious obligations and responsibilities of citizenship. So we've got those kind of segregated. Now we're going to go off and have a good time. We're going to go review the ballot before we vote. Those are not seen as overlapping activities. I've always said that when we pay our taxes, we should go down to the courthouse and grateful school children should dance out to thank us for paying the taxes and polkas and I don't know. So there's a lot we could do with ritual and ceremony that we don't do. So I do hope that idea will stick, that reconciling the dutiful and the fun has been part of the Chautauqua tradition from its origins, and we could use more of that. Because in truth, I thought, where else would I go if I wanted to see people doing dutiful things? I go to Rotary, I'm a Rotarian. Okay, so I could go to Rotary. We don't sing as much as we used to, so there's that decline. But yes, there are other places, but we could certainly use more visible, more public, less bordered. You don't have to be a member, you can come and go over porous borders. I think that would be wonderful to have that demonstration. Fourth thing, boy, is this urgent. Find ways to give oratory a new life. It hasn't been doing well, oratory, for quite a spell. I just read Joe Lepore's History of the United States and got reminded that there were times George Whitefield would speak in the Second Great Awakening and thousands of people would come and his voice would carry, and it was an astounding thing. William Jennings Bryan was, of course, here. And so that notion that the spoken word with a present audience, that can actually have a power and reach the spirit and shape conduct for days, years afterwards, that I would like to see Chautauqua find more opportunities to explicitly say that's what they're doing. Not just say we're inviting a really good speaker, but say we're saving our society by bringing oratory as a form of education and deliberation back into being. Then a subcategory of that is to rescue the poor word debate from identity theft. Debate is a process that can be lively, it can be spirited, it can be a little bit antagonistic, but you cover ideas and you stay with those ideas and you follow them through and you respond to each other. What we have now, they're called presidential debates. Identity theft. The word debate has been stolen, and it usually means it's a synonym for trying to talk over the other person. That is a very bad form of identity theft. And so to give the meaning of the word debate back to the word debate, that is so necessary. And I don't really see that much happening to say that. Oh, I do see where it's happening is in high schools. That's really great. I love it when the young people so dramatically outperform their elders. I just think that's a very delightful moment. Makes you feel better about the future, not so good about the present moment. So, okay. Then, and I will volunteer the rubber chicken of civil and wide-ranging discussion for those kinds of events if that could be helpful. Now, fifth, I would really encourage something that I did not see in reading about the history of this organization, and maybe I should have looked more at New York. There's a strong track of having occasions of exploring public issues, and certainly here an amazing track of exploring music and arts. And yet they seem to be segregated, the public issues and the celebration of music. We had one inspired episode at the Center of the American West where we had an event on the 150th anniversary of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ending the Mexican-American War. And we had a singer, we had Brenda Romero from the College of Music singing songs, corridos about the border. We had Lorna de Cervantes reciting poetry about the border. We had George Sanchez from UCLA giving a fine speech on the history of the border and the treaty. And you could see the audience's ears just shifting and their minds probably shifting with that as they went from the music to the poetry to the well-delivered speech. And it seems like the neurons plead for that. Don't do what you're doing right now. You're very kind, but you are just sitting and listening to a speaker. And thank you so much for that. It's a great act of tolerance. But can you imagine if I were to step aside and someone were to sing beautifully, how happy you would be? So, just a thought. Not going to happen. So, but so those different forms of listening are very engaging, and I'm so happy to say that for reasons that none of us could fully put together, our teachers group has become very fixed on how Beyonce could come to our aid in communicating history, and we're working on it. 2 or 3 of the teachers are probably all the teachers are way ahead of me because you could be behind me on that, but she's coming up a lot in our discussions, and I think she's going to hear about it, and I think she's going to be very pleased. Okay, 6, and at this point sometimes people think, oh no, how many of these are there? But by understanding, what time do I have to end? When do I have to end?
Fairly soon.
Fairly soon.
We want to give time for people to ask you a couple questions.
When your formal meeting starts at 8?
No, fairly soon.
Oh. Well, maybe you could have your formal meeting and I could just keep talking. Is that?
Yes. Music.
So, well, already. Okay, I'll go really fast. Okay. So, 6. Come to society's aid and keep reminding us of the enormous value that we gain from being in each other's material presence. And we need that reminder because it is a key societal need in 2019 that there are ways in which being in each other's company just makes being in digital connectedness a very pathetic state of affairs. Well, there you are. Now, you almost didn't get to hear that because I almost had to stop speaking, and so this is good.
Well, it was worth.
Thank you. And that really, higher education should have that base totally covered, and we're not doing it. We're going down a road of extreme enthusiasm for digital education. So we might change that course, and then you better be ahead of us at that point. 7th, seize every opportunity to make the case for, oh, that's actually the very same point. That's the point I just gave you. Okay, that we should invest in the material settings that permit that face-to-face thing. Okay, then 8. You would be so sad if you'd cut me off on this one. Build on the challenge and opportunities that come with the material and persistent relationship between Boulder, Colorado and the Cottagers, Texas, as 2 pretty darn disparate sectors of American society today. So I think, for instance, of how Governor Hickenlooper several years ago contacted me. He'd been to Texas a couple times. He said, those people really identify as Texans. We want Coloradans to do that. His hypothesis, which we could learn more about, his hypothesis was that it's the fact that Texas requires so much study of Texas history that resistance wears down, and people just say, stop teaching me Texas history, I'm a Texan. So he asked us to do lesson plans, and so that's one idea of how to bring Texas and Boulder, the cottagers in Boulder, into relationship. Another one, which is dazzling and makes Colorado look like it's just flagging and lagging, the Tejano Monument on the Texas Capitol grounds. Have people seen that? That is an astounding tribute to the Tejano residents and first settlers and the people conquered and displaced in many ways by the Anglo-American arrival. Andres Tijerina was one of the Austin people who really pushed for that. It's very sizable. It's not on the edge. We are locked right now in a very long debate about where on our Capitol grounds we will put a quite small monument for the Sand Creek Massacre. Rick Perry was governor. He was behind that. He pushed for that. So who thought that you could come to a talk in Boulder, Colorado, and I would say, we must learn from Texas, but I am saying that. And I am also saying that we should all, maybe it's a separate book group, we should read Edna Ferber's book, Giant, which I read because Laura Bush told me to. I was to speak at the White House, and I was to speak about Edna Ferber, and that book totally makes fun of rich Texans, and it says at one point, one character says to the other, you know, a man makes his fortune in Texas. Next thing you know, he thinks he ought to be governor, then he thinks he ought to be president. So when I'm meeting Mrs. Bush, I'm thinking, have you read that book, Mrs. Bush? And she has a merry sense of humor. Then a couple more things of the ninth suggestion. I think there is a dialogue waiting to happen with the cottagers and the residents of tiny houses. Tiny houses are such a trend, they're so popular, they're so well thought of, but they're important because people who have lived in abundance and had all kinds of space and all kinds of stuff, in many cases it's people saying, I don't want to do that. The cottagers live in a tiny space, or comparatively tiny space, and then return to larger spaces, and they are people particularly well set up to reflect on our relationship to material possessions, to leave a state of abundance, and to then, later in the season, as the climate changes, to leave a state of sensible and tolerable limitation to return to abundance. So what an interesting perspective, and what a cool forum that would be. I think we should, this is number 10, to build on the moral and spiritual example of barbershop quartets. They are models for human relations. Maybe barbershop quartets quarrel fiercely and struggle bitterly behind the scenes, but when they step on stage, they seem harmonious in every sense. It would be madness for one barbershop quartet participant to try to dominate or drown out the other members of the team. And then finally, for formal recommendations, I'm going to pack, there'll be 12, but there's only 12. So the 11th one is that Calvin Trillin is really, really funny, and he wrote a book. He's in his 80s now, maybe late 80s, but I think he still travels. He wrote a book called Tepper Isn't Going Out, which is the novel about parking in New York City. And so if we wanted to have a forum, and I can't think why we wouldn't, on parking spaces as symbolically charged sites of contest in American life, we could bring Calvin Trillin, and that would be so fun, and would just put a whole other cast. So the last item I wanted to talk about was race, and how lucky that I'm out of time, so I can say very quickly. This part of the Chautauqua heritage is different from some of the others here. Chautauqua came into being as a dominantly white middle-class enterprise. So how do we live with that heritage? We don't flee it, we don't evade it, but we instead exuberantly embrace opportunities to show the Chautauqua supporters are imaginative and creative and willing to take risks in the cause of facing up to difficult historical heritages in a spirit of truth and reconciliation. So that is the plan. I'm going to just give one example. So not so good on involvement of Indian people. Here is from Sylvia Petham's book, a skit from the 1930s. One of the Mann sisters' skits was described by a reporter, so I'm going to try to get light on this, in the audience, who wrote, Chautauquans were looking in on an Indian scene with its tom-toms, feathers, and braves, all of which swept in from one corner of the stage. Their reign was short-lived. In the shadows lurked the western cowboys with 6 guns and high hats. The cowboys made quick work of the Indians, and the scene closed with a colorful chorus and the rope act by the Mann sisters. So, what to do? We had a wonderful speaker, Ernest House, spoke in our group today, and he talked about Indian humor. So, there's a lot of good Indian humorists and Indian comedians. Now, there's a lecture series waiting to happen. And Keith Basso, the wonderful anthropologist, did a great book of Apache jokes about white men. Wonderful way to see yourself as others see you. So to capitalize on Indian people's humor, give them the descriptions of the programs of the past, and let them, if they choose to, if Indian people want to come perform skits in which white middle class members of the audience engaged in an uplifting civil discussion. So that would be fun. It'd be really funny to see what Indian people would make of middle-class white people having civic forums. And I have ideas, but I won't go too far with that. So I have other ideas about getting mariachi bands, and which are the most invigorating form of music that there is in the world. And I have a hypothesis that maybe gospel music, Black gospel performers were popular over quite a period of time here because the non-denominational prescriptions made it very hard to speak of religion in anything but kind of cerebral, tranquil tones. And by bringing in Black gospel music performers, that was the only way in which you could experience full-out religious emotion and engagement. Then the music stopped, and then you had to go back to having lectures on religion. But it seems like there's a reason why that Black gospel thing was there, and that it might be a connection and a form of appreciation to reactivate. And then my final biggest point is that you could capitalize on the opportunity that our coincidental timing represents tonight. Teachers were the founders of this Chautauqua. That is the best tradition of all, and putting that front and center would be cool. Teachers, could you maybe just wave at me? That would be nice. So there they are, they're all waving at me. Could you whoop now? Could you whoop, teachers? Okay, they're lively is what I guess I'm trying to establish here. And they have wonderful things to say and great ideas. So ask the teachers who are with me this week, how would you make use of an institution like the Colorado Chautauqua, they're from all over the country, if you had such a thing in your vicinity? It would be incredibly interesting to know what they thought about that. So put the teachers back, they were the founders, put them at the center of enterprises and see what happens with that. And my last comment is that I was very struck to read again and again in many places about how Lori Paddock saved the day, that Lori Paddock did the, with I'm sure the help of others, but he submitted the paperwork for the historic designation of Chautauqua when it was in a very bad, dilapidated state, 1974, got the designation in 1978, all of the transformations that should be ballyhooed occurred from that. I knew Lori Paddock pretty well, never talked to him about that, and that was one of my main sensations in thinking about tonight, was wishing that I could talk to Lori Paddock about this. So, thank you.
We have time for some questions, if you've got questions of Patty. Anybody?
If they won't, I can tell you some people I brought with me who will fill it. Yes,
Barbara?
yes,
Well, Josh is back here, and we served on the board with Patty, and I must say, she was very entertaining as a board member.
Nothing wrong with that. I guess I would just be very interested in knowing whether you heard anything that might be worth
And
taking
I'm
moving
interested
on.
when you talk about the teachers suggesting ideas.
Yeah.
We would welcome that.
Right, I think we had.
Yeah, so you mentioned oration, that skill has died, and I would say that it might have died with Senator Everett Dirksen. But how do you bring something like that back?
That's a great question. Who killed oratory? That would be a. I can't think. I mean, I think that what we had. I I guess that was in my remarks on the fact that this place had blackface entertainers and has a heritage to address there. I personally I grew up in a small town in Southern California, and when I was maybe 16, 15 years old, I finally heard a black preacher for the first time in my life, and I thought, I had no idea that that could be done. So to some degree, it's going to other cultural traditions. I personally have a very eccentric style of speech, but I am, unlike a lot of academics, sorry to say this, but I am present and happy to be present and happy to be with others. And simply that's not great oratory, but it's a way of making everyone feel alive in that. Most people, I mean, I know too many people. Good evening. When we look back to the Gilded Age, we see an era of, and it's happened all over. And it's not, okay, so I have a friend, Randy Olson, who is a science communicator. He's done all this work on how you can, if you put people in an MRI and you present information to them, and it can be very interesting information, nothing much happens in the MRI until you present it in a format he calls the ABT format. You could just as easily call it thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and you make your opening statement, and I'll just use the example that he's pointed out, because it does not have anything to do with the content, or the value of the content necessarily, but America was once a great nation, and we have lost that, and people are taking it away from us, but we still are people who could stand up to that. Therefore, elect me. But therefore, apparently the results are that you can say a lot of different things. So actually, this is a really interesting story. He tried to contact the Hillary Clinton team, and he couldn't get in. It's a very closed operation, but he pointed out, he couldn't really find anybody to say it to, but she did and, or she did therefore. And that's not the whole story, but there are things, eloquence is nice if people have that, but you can cultivate that. But I would just say the sense of joy that there is such a thing as being present and speaking to others and trying to think. I will say this is a very clumsy thing, but numbering really helps, because people think, okay, she's moving along, and there's peace of mind delivered from that. So it's not, this money that the Mellon Foundation gave us is to repurpose the skills of young historians, take the academic training, drop what's not working in public arenas, and cultivate better skills of communication. So I think in a year or two, working with some folks on that, to some degree we have to say, quit doing what you were taught in seminars. As to what has happened to, Everett Dirksen was a major figure in supporting the Civil Rights Act, and there are things that I could say, well, here's an interesting man. Not supporting it with political negotiating more than deep conviction, probably. So I don't know what I make, I feel so sad when I think we have two people. We had Morris Udall, and we still have Senator Alan Simpson, and they are both incredibly funny, and the joy of seeing what they would say next is so great. And then I will often try to list others. So we have Alan Simpson, we had Morris Udall, we have the city manager of Greeley. True, Roy Otto is extremely funny. He is really one of the funniest public officials that's ever been on the planet. So now we have three. Oh boy, we're really moving along here. So, but it's so interesting to see that you have to struggle so hard to find somebody who has put wit and that kind of charm. If you haven't seen Roy Otto, I'll send Cindy the music video he made he imitates the woman in Flashdance, and it's remarkable. It's just remarkable. So, I'll answer much more quickly. Yeah. Did you hate those ideas? Are you stunned by those ideas? Would you like to have the teachers do some brainstorming about?
Yes, we would like to. If you all would discuss that, we would be grateful to you for any suggestions that you have. Having visited, I know it's been incredibly brief. I hope you have a little time to walk around. And I think Kate gave you an introduction to Chautauqua. So we would love to have that. But Patty, I want to thank you for giving us something of a blueprint and these these ideas for the future, which is exactly what we asked you to do. And I really appreciate it. And this whole collaboration that you talked about, I think would be a wonderful thing to explore. So I'm going to give you these books that you may already have. But you'll have another copy of these along with our brand new hot off the press annual report.
An annual report?